just wanted to cover, one of the last things on a personal note. I mean, one of the things that wanted me to have you on the show, Ben, is your honesty about some of the things you faced in your life. And, I came out a few years ago and told my audience about some dark times I had when I was actually in New York City, and I struggled with addiction. And in 2001, the Trade Center came down, and I had a heroin overdose. And I told people about it. About 20 years later, I told my wife and family about it. We made a whole movie about it. And a lot of people, I was very scared to talk about that, but a lot of people, it really helped them because, these things happen to a lot of people and a lot of friends and family. And I think it's really powerful when people talk about this stuff. And look, I know you had a time in your life where you struggled with addiction. And I just think sometimes it's important for men and women out there to know that you and we weren't always this way. We weren't always in a place where we feel really good and empowered and on top of our game. And I was just wondering if there's something you can tell us about that, or something you learned about that, or if someone's out there in a tough space, just thoughts for them.
Yeah, well, I mean, addiction is a powerful beast. And for me, I mean, one of the craziest things to me is, like a lot of people view me as just like, I'm a regular guy. I'm a dad. A lot of people know me as a dad, like I love my kids. I make dad jokes. I'm your typical, wear a fanny pack at Disney World dad. Like I just actually wore a fanny pack for the first time at the Bitcoin conference, and I found out it was really useful. And so now I'm going to have one for all the time. So now I know I'm officially in the club. But what's always funny to me is when people say, oh my gosh, you got this addiction history. Like I would have never thought that about you. I'm like, go tell that to all the people that I was doing meth with in the early 2000s. And they would be like, oh no, he was a terrible person. Like, what do you mean you can't see him doing drugs? I was basically, on hard drugs, mainly meth. That was my thing from 2007. From the age of 17 until 24 for 7 years. And it was very dark and it was very bad. And, that's just who I was, I homeless at different times, and I did the whole thing. It was my life. It was my obsession. I tried to get clean a couple of times. I couldn't do it. I was on meth, coke, weed, 7 hits of acid. I got into a fight with a bunch of police officers and I overdosed. I was under arrest. It was like a really, really, really bad situation, facing a lot of prison time actually in 2007. And so I woke up out of the coma. I was in a coma for 3 days, and I woke up in the hospital bed. I just woke up, and I just remember sitting there in the bed and the light shining through. I had a breathing tube down my throat. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't breathe on my own. And I just remember I opened my eyes. I saw the sun. I was like, God, thank you. I just knew that I should be dead. And I didn't even know at that time what had happened. Later on, found out I went into a massive overdose, and I was, very, off, teetering on life and death for several hours. And, I just woke up and said, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm ready to be done with this. And so I went to a rehab facility. It's actually called No Longer Bound. It's in Cumming, Georgia. And I was there for a year. And then I did another year as an intern there. And then, so from 2009 all the way until I went into full-time crypto, basically in 2018, I worked with people in addiction recovery. I was the executive director of an addiction recovery center for teenage boys for a long time. That was my heart, because I was in my addiction when I was a teenager and beyond. And so I wanted to help kids. I did that for a long time. And the message is very clear. The lie of addiction is it doesn't get better. That's what keeps you locked in, is that it will never be better than this. When you're getting high and when you're living that lifestyle, that's the peak. But in reality, that's the lie your mind is tricked on, the trick that gets, made on you. Actually, when you're a regular person, not addicted to drugs, not addicted to alcohol, that's when you're really living your best life. And you don't understand that until you get out of it and you look back on it. And so I would just say to anybody who's struggling with that or has family struggling through that, don't give up on them, keep encouraging them. Or if it's you, just understand, look, if you find yourself having to justify what you're doing to keep doing it, it's probably a good sign you might need some help. And I'm as big of a proponent as anyone is getting structured help. I had a whole year where I did nothing but work on myself. And that's really what has led me to the point I'm at today. That's where I learned how to work hard and learn how to work through stuff. And I would also just, the last thing to add on is I would just say in my experience working with people in addiction, because I work with people in adult and then teenagers in addiction, there's always things driving it. It's not just you like doing drugs. That's also the lie that gets you hooked in. Guilt, shame, things from your past, whether it's sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse from your past, traumatic events, death in your family, death of a parent, whatever it is, there's a pain and something that is a hole inside of you that's not getting filled, and you're filling it with that negativity, with the drugs, because you're trying to numb the way you really feel. When you truly actually start feeling whatever that traumatic event was and go back through that and really get healed from it, that's when you'll truly find freedom. And, people ask me all the time, or not all the time, just like, it's a question people ask, like, what's the best day of your life? Like, people always expect you to say, like, oh, like the day that my first child was born, or the day that I got married, or the day that, I started my business. The day I went to rehab. That's the best day of my life, because everything else is, a reflection of that decision and what I went through at that time.
Powerful, powerful stuff, man. We've had Dr. Gabor Mate on the show, and he believes that all addiction comes from trauma. He doesn't believe that all trauma causes addiction, but he believes all addiction comes from trauma. And he's worked on the streets with people in Vancouver and has had an incredible career. And yeah, when I look back at my addiction, I didn't want to be me, and so I wanted to escape me. Sometimes, honestly, my own criticism, I think, for not being what I thought I should have been. And so, again, it was there to take me out of reality. And little did I know there was nothing fun about that. And so now I try to be present for the good and bad times. And I am thankful every day that I'm sober. It's something that's a big deal for me. And I appreciate your input there. And I would say to anybody else out there, things can change and things can improve, even though when you're repeating a cycle and to you, it looks like it will never change because it hasn't changed for a year or 2 years or 3 years. There are ways out, and like you said, structure and other people and other inspiration can really make a massive difference. And the other last thing I'd say is that I found that some of the people that went down that route have now built some of the most incredible things out there. A lot of my guests on the show, including guys like Grant Cardone, used to be in the same place, and they're like, "What, him?" And I find that those people sometimes, when they can focus their energy and put it in a positive direction, can sometimes do incredible things. So I would say if you're struggling out there, you're probably more powerful than you think you are. And if you can channel this in the right direction, you could have an incredibly productive life too. So just some thoughts.
Absolutely. I think there's a reason for that. The obvious reason is like you go through something really tough and you come out on the other side and you learn how to do that. And that's something that continue in life. I think a lot of people that end up in addiction, it's because they have very curious minds, and you start going like, oh, I was told that, drugs are bad, that weed is bad, but oh my gosh, first time I did it made me feel real good. Like, everything must be a lie. And so you start going down that rabbit hole, and then you start questioning everything. And then you don't even know who you are anymore once you go down that road a lot. But it's a lot of that curiosity and that questioning and that judgment of what's going on, not judgment, but like being able to judge where you are at in life compared to other people. I think a lot of that is what, really drives people down the road to get super sucked into positive things. And, one thing that I always thought was funny was a guy who I knew in rehab, he told me that he thought I was a closet perfectionist. And that was always my problem, is I could never do anything perfect or well. And so I just kept going further down the negative hole there. And, he was dead right. Like, that's the thing, is I want to do everything so well. And I want to achieve, and I want to perform, and I want to do everything positive now. But in the past, like, I just always channeled that, in the wrong direction. And so a lot of people who are locked in addiction, especially from teenage years, the majority of kids or the majority of people that are in addiction, you started in your teenage years. And you stunted your growth in a lot of ways. And when you're able to break free of that, you'll actually discover there's a lot of qualities that were getting developed in you that you weren't able to quite reach yet. And when you break free from that addiction, those things start to come back. And you find out the best version of yourself is somebody better than you thought it was.